The legend of the bound bride. The mist rolled down from the mountains like a tired sigh, wrapping the small valley of Raventon in a pale shroud. Morning was only beginning, yet the air already carried the scent of rain and wet soil. In that village, forgotten by time, untouched by change, traditions ruled stronger than any law. And one of those traditions had bound generations in fear and silence. They called it, the binding of the moon. Every 7th spring, when the first storm arrived before planting season, the eldest daughter of the valley's oldest family was tied to the sacred oak for one night, a ritual meant to appease the spirits of the earth and ensure a good harvest. No one questioned it. No one dared. Until that year, when fate brought Alara and Jacob together. Jacob Hale was a farmer, quiet, broad-shouldered, with hands that knew both the warmth of soil and the weight of grief. He had lost his wife 2 winters ago to fever, and since then he had lived alone at the edge of the fields, speaking more to the wind than to people. His days were simple: till, sow, rest, repeat. Yet deep inside, something in him was restless, like unplowed ground. That evening, the storm arrived earlier than expected. Black clouds bruised the horizon, and lightning slit the sky into trembling light. Jacob was gathering tools into his barn when he heard shouting, distant, panicked, and female. He hesitated. The villagers rarely came near his land, and no woman would wander out during the binding night. Yet the sound came again, please. Someone. Jacob grabbed his lantern and ran. Near the old oak that marked the border between his field and the forest, he saw her, a young woman, bound to the trunk with coarse rope, soaked to the bone, her white gown clinging to her skin. Her hair, dark as rainwater, whipped across her face as she struggled against the knots. When she saw him, her eyes widened with desperate hope. "Please," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Please, I beg you, untie this." Jacob froze. He knew what this was. The binding. The villagers' ritual. The girl, Alara, the blacksmith's daughter, was chosen this year. If he touched those ropes, he would break the oldest law of Raventon. It was said that whoever interfered would bring a curse upon the land. His breath caught in his chest. "I can't," he murmured. "You know what this means." "I don't care what it means." Alara cried, tears mixing with rain. "It's madness. They said the spirits demand it, but there are no spirits, only fear. Please, I can't stand here all night." Thunder rolled overhead, shaking the ground. Her wrists bled where the rope cut into her skin. Something deep in Jacob's chest, something human, something defiant, flared. He remembered his wife's dying words, "Don't let fear rule you, Jacob." He dropped the lantern, stepped closer, and in one swift motion drew his pocket knife. The blade sliced through the rope. The moment it snapped, lightning struck the hill behind them. The oak trembled, and the air cracked like the sky itself was watching. Alara fell forward, into his arms. They ran through the storm to his cottage, the rain biting their faces. Inside, Jacob threw a blanket around her shoulders, stoked the fire, and stood awkwardly by the hearth as she trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one else would have done it." "You shouldn't thank me," Jacob muttered. "They'll come for us by dawn." She looked up, defiant even through her fear. "Then let them. I'd rather face them than the dark tied to that tree." He studied her, the firelight dancing in her eyes, the defiance that seemed too strong for someone her age. "You shouldn't have been chosen," he said softly. "No one should be chosen," she answered. "It's just a way to make people afraid of questioning them." Her voice shook, but her words didn't. Jacob felt something shift inside him, like a window opening after years of being sealed. He'd thought the world was fixed, unchangeable. Yet this girl, trembling before his fire, had just defied centuries of fear. When dawn came, the storm had passed. But the village had changed. A dozen riders came up the muddy road, men with torches, faces hard with suspicion. At their front rode the elder, Marlowe, his beard silver and his eyes like cold iron. "Jacob Hale," he barked, "you have broken the sacred rite. The soil will turn barren, the crops will die. You've doomed us all." Jacob stood before his gate, his jaw tight. "I saved a life. You disobeyed the ancestors," Marlowe hissed. "The curse will fall upon your land first." Behind him, Alara appeared in the doorway, wrapped in his blanket. "Then let it fall on me too," she said. "I was the one tied there. I was the one supposed to beg the sky for mercy." "Well, I beg you now, show me the mercy you claim to believe in. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The elder's expression faltered, but only for a second. Tradition is not mercy, he spat. It's survival. Jacob's hands curled into fists. If survival means sacrifice, then it's not worth keeping. For a long moment, no one spoke. Rain dripped from the trees, and the wind carried the faint scent of smoke. Then, slowly, Marlowe turned his horse and rode back toward the village. The others followed, not with conviction, but with uncertainty. Days passed. The villagers whispered. Some said Jacob had cursed them all. Others said maybe he had freed them. But when the first shoots of wheat pushed through the soil, stronger, greener than ever, the fear began to fade. The rains returned, gentle and even. The harvest that year was the richest in a decade. And in the quiet after the storm, Jacob and Alara found something neither had expected: peace. She stayed with him at the farm, at first to help with the planting. But as spring turned to summer, her laughter became part of the house, soft, bright, filling the spaces that grief had hollowed. One evening, as they sat under the same oak, now just a tree, no longer sacred or feared, she ran her fingers over the scar on her wrist. "Do you ever think they were right?" she asked softly. "That there was some curse?" Jacob smiled faintly. "If there was, it's gone now. Maybe breaking it was what the spirits wanted all along." She looked at him, the sunset painting her face gold. "You broke their law to save me." "Why?" He hesitated. "Then, because when I heard you beg, I realized I'd been tied too, to grief, to fear, to silence. Cutting your rope freed me as well." Alara smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Then maybe that's what the binding was for, not to trap, but to test who would dare to break it." They sat together until the stars came out, the oak rustling above them like an old guardian finally at peace. But Raventon was slow to forget. A year later, another storm came, the same thunder, the same winds. The elders met again, arguing whether to resume the ritual. Some still feared the old stories. But when they looked at Jacob's fields, blooming with golden grain, they hesitated. Marlowe, the elder, came one morning to Jacob's gate. He looked older, smaller somehow. "The others say we should abandon the binding," he said. "That it was never the spirits, just superstition." "Maybe you were right." Jacob said nothing, only nodded. Marlowe's eyes softened as he turned to leave. "Take care of her," he said quietly. "You've both carried enough for all of us." That autumn, Raventon celebrated its first harvest without fear. Children played near the oak, tying ribbons around it for luck, not sacrifice. Music filled the square, and when Jacob and Alara walked through the crowd, people smiled instead of whispering. Yet at night, when the moon rose high and silver, Jacob would sometimes wake to the sound of wind in the branches, soft, almost like a whisper. "Thank you." He never told anyone. Some truths didn't need to be spoken. Years later, when the old oak finally fell in a storm, its roots exposed the strangest thing: a stone carving buried beneath, depicting two figures standing side by side, hands joined, facing the sky. No one knew who carved it or when. But some said it was a sign that the binding had always been meant to unite, not to imprison. Alara and Jacob lived long, quiet years together. Their farm became the heart of the valley, a place where no one feared the past. And whenever travelers came through Raventon, they heard the story, how one stormy night, a farmer broke a curse not with magic but with mercy. Epilogue. On his final day, Jacob sat under the younger oak that had sprouted beside the fallen one. The wind was warm, the air full of the scent of harvest. Alara knelt beside him, holding his hand. "Do you regret breaking the tradition?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No. Because it wasn't the tradition I broke, it was the chain." She pressed her forehead to his, tears falling on his hands. And as the wind swept through the fields, it carried his final breath like a prayer, not to gods, not to spirits, but to the land itself. The farmer who froze that night, and then broke the tradition, had sown more than crops. He had sown freedom.